It was supposed to be a place of wonder, the Oakwood City Zoo, alive with the cacophony of exotic calls and children's laughter. But in the expansive gorilla enclosure, a heavy silence reigned, emanating from its most prominent resident, Bella. For 3 agonizing months, since the devastating loss of her infant, Bella had been a specter of her former self. She sat hunched in the farthest, shadowed corner, a colossal figure carved from grief, her fur dull, her eyes vacant, fixed on some unseen point on the dusty floor as if awaiting a verdict that would never come. The keepers, a dedicated team led by head zookeeper Sarah, watched from a discreet distance, their hushed updates into walkie-talkies painting a grim picture. Still no change with Bella. Hasn't touched her morning meal. No response to enrichment. Weeks had bled into months, each day a replica of the last. Bella remained withdrawn, a statue of sorrow, seemingly oblivious to the verdant habitat painstakingly designed for her, or the presence of the other gorillas who occasionally cast wary glances her way before retreating. Most visitors, expecting the playful antics often seen in nature documentaries, barely gave the motionless Bella a second glance. Their chatter would dim momentarily as they passed her section, a fleeting shadow of shared unease, before they hurried on towards more animated displays. But today, one small figure broke from the stream of the crowd. A boy, perhaps 7, with thoughtful hazel eyes and a quiet demeanor, drifted towards the thick acrylic viewing panel of Bella's enclosure. His name was Leo. He didn't shout or bang on the glass like some of the other children. He just stopped, a stillness mirroring Bella's own, as if an invisible thread had drawn him there. And that's when the air in the gorilla pavilion seemed to crackle. For the first time in 97 days, Bella moved with purpose. Her massive head, heavy with an unspoken sorrow, slowly lifted. Her gaze, once lost in an internal abyss, swept across the enclosure and, with an almost electric jolt, locked onto the small, quiet boy standing on the other side of the barrier. Leo didn't flinch under the sudden, intense scrutiny of the giant ape. He remained calm, his small hand instinctively rising to rest ly on the cool surface of the viewing panel. Bella, who had rebuffed every attempt at engagement from keepers and shunned her own kind, began to move. It was a slow, deliberate trek from her corner of shadows. Each heavy footfall seemed to echo the profound grief she carried, yet there was a new, undeniable pull in her bearing. The few nearby visitors gasped, some instinctively stepping back, phone cameras hesitantly rising. She hadn't approached the public viewing area in months. Now, she stood directly before Leo, a towering, powerful presence, her warm breath fogging a patch of the acrylic. The world outside this silent communion seemed to fade. The chattering crowd, the distant calls of other animals, the hum of the zoo, all receded. There was only the gorilla and the boy, locked in a gaze that felt ancient and deeply significant. Then, with a grace that belied her immense size, Bella raised her broad, leathery hand. Purposefully, gently, she pressed her palm flat against the acrylic, her dark fingers splayed wide, directly opposite Leo's small hand. Time seemed to hold its breath. Onlookers were frozen, a mixture of awe and apprehension on their faces. Leo, showing no fear, mirrored her gesture perfectly, his tiny palm meeting hers through the thick divide. A collective sigh rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. "Sarah, you need to see this," a keeper's urgent voice crackled over the radio. "Bella, she's at the glass. With a child." Sarah, already en route after preliminary reports of Bella stirring, arrived at a brisk walk. She stopped short, her professional composure momentarily shaken by the sight. Bella, touching the glass, interacting. It hadn't happened since the baby. Not once, she murmured to herself, a knot tightening in her chest. She moved closer, her eyes, trained by years of observation, narrowed. There was something in Bella's posture, in the unwavering focus of her gaze on Leo. It wasn't just curiosity. It felt like recognition. Sharp, focused, and intensely emotional. It was a look that transcended species, a silent, desperate plea. As Sarah watched, captivated and deeply puzzled, Bella began to move again. Her free hand, the one not pressed against the glass opposite Leo's, rose slowly. Her fingers curled and uncurled, a series of subtle but distinct gestures. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like random movements, an animal's idle fidgeting. But Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced, sifting through years of behavioral notes, training protocols, and enrichment programs. "It can't be," she whispered, taking an involuntary step closer to the glass. The gestures were rough, unpracticed, like a half-forgotten language. But they were deliberate. They were signs. Basic, rudimentary signs, hello, play, baby, ones that had been part of a short-lived, experimental bonding program Bella had participated in years ago, during her own pregnancy, a program designed to test interspecies emotional connectivity with carefully selected mother-child pairs. Leo tilted his head, his brow furrowed in innocent curiosity. He didn't seem afraid, if anything, a serene calm had settled over him. His hand remained steadfastly against the glass. His mother, Emily, finally navigated through the hushed onlookers and gently touched his shoulder. "Leo, honey," she began softly, "maybe we should." But Leo didn't move, his attention entirely captivated. Sarah turned, her gaze sharp, locking onto Emily's face. "Ma'am," she said, her voice low but firm, "what did you say his name was?" Emily looked flustered by the directness. "Leo. Leo Matthews." A chill snaked down Sarah's spine. Matthews. The name echoed in her memory, linked to faded files and old program rosters. "Oakwood program, number 7, she muttered, more to herself than to Emily. It was a long shot, almost impossible. I don't understand," Emily said, confusion clouding her features. "I'll be right back," Sarah stated, a sudden urgency in her tone. She turned and almost ran towards the zoo's administration block, her heart pounding with a wild premonition. Inside the records room, dust motes danced in the dim light as Sarah tore through archived boxes, her hands flying over old paperwork, therapy logs, and program participant lists. Years ago, Bella had been the star of that brief animal-assisted bonding initiative. It had been discontinued due to funding cuts and inconclusive initial results. But Sarah remembered the detailed notes. Her fingers finally closed around a faded blue binder labeled Primate Interaction Program, Year 2. Her eyes scanned the pages, a frantic search for a name, a connection. And then, there it was. An entry dated nearly 5 years prior, Mother, Emily Matthews. Child, Leo Matthews, age 2. Weekly visits, 4 months. Program discontinued post-subject infant loss, Bella's first stillbirth. Sarah stared at the entry, her fingers tightening on the page until her knuckles were white. "Oh my God," she breathed. She fumbled for an accompanying file of photographs, her hands shaking. She found one, a slightly blurry image, but unmistakable. A tiny toddler in a bright red hoodie, his face alight with innocent joy, pressing his small hand against the reinforced glass of the gorilla enclosure. On the other side, a younger, pregnant Bella, her own hand mirroring the child's gesture. It was Leo. Smaller, rounder-cheeked, but undeniably him. Bella hadn't just fixated on a random child. She remembered him. Clutching the photograph, Sarah raced back to the enclosure. The scene was much as she'd left it, Bella and Leo, still connected by their hands on the glass, the silent epicenter of a rapt audience. Emily stood nearby, looking worried and bewildered. Sarah knelt beside her. "Emily," she said, her voice gentle but strained, "do you remember bringing Leo here, years ago? When he was just a toddler?" Emily hesitated, her brow furrowed in thought. Yes, I think I do. Vaguely. He was very little. I was going through a tough time back then, after his father passed. Someone suggested this zoo program, something about bonding, emotional support for new mothers and their children. I didn't think it had any real, lasting impact, but Leo, he seemed to love coming here. Sarah slowly held out the photograph. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's us. That's Leo. Leo, curious, leaned in. He studied the image of the much younger boy in the red hoodie. A flicker of something, not quite memory but a dawning understanding, crossed his face. "That's me," he whispered, a note of wonder in his voice. "Yes," Sarah affirmed, her gaze shifting between the photo and the two figures at the glass. "Bella was pregnant then. The logs say she responded to you, Leo, more than to anyone else in the program. You used to sit here, just like this, every week for months." Leo tilted his head. I don't really remember," he said, his honesty unwavering. "But Bella does," Sarah said softly, her eyes on the massive gorilla. As if on cue, Bella shifted. It was a subtle movement, gentle but filled with an undeniable purpose. She lowered herself further, almost to a sitting position, her eyes still locked on Leo. Then, she began to tap the glass with her knuckles in a slow, rhythmic pattern. 3 distinct taps, a brief pause, then 2 more. Tap tap tap, pause, tap tap. It was a beat, a game, a fragment of a shared past. Leo blinked. He didn't know why, or how, but his own small fingers began to mirror the pattern on his side of the glass. Tap tap tap, pause, tap tap. A soft, guttural rumble, a sound of deep contentment no one had heard from Bella in months, vibrated from her chest. Her dark lips parted slightly, almost in a smile. Sarah watched, stunned into silence for a moment. It was their pattern, she explained in an odd whisper to Emily. It's in the old notes. Bella used to play that tapping game with him when he was a toddler, before her first baby was born. He would initiate the taps, and she'd mimic him. Leo looked up at Sarah, his young eyes wide with a profound question. Did she miss me? Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. Oh, sweetheart, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I think she never, ever forgot you. The murmurs in the crowd shifted, the atmosphere transforming from mere spectacle to something akin to reverence. Some onlookers discreetly wiped tears from their eyes. A father pulled his young daughter a little closer. Then Bella did something that solidified the moment in everyone's memory. She began to sway, a slow, rhythmic side-to-side motion, like a mother rocking an infant. Her massive arms curved inward, cradling empty air, yet somehow, not empty at all. Leo watched her, his gaze unwavering. His small head lowered slightly, a shadow of an unnameable emotion crossing his face. He turned to his mother and whispered, his voice barely audible but clear in the hushed air, "She's pretending I'm her baby." No one corrected him. Because in that moment, everyone knew he might just be right. The afternoon sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the zoo, but Bella remained by the glass, her gaze soft and fixed on Leo. And Leo, with a quiet patience that belied his years, stayed with her. The initial crowd thinned, the novelty of the scene giving way to a heavier, more poignant understanding. Zoo staff, under Sarah's direction, had discreetly cordoned off the immediate area around Bella's enclosure, allowing the pair their space, a quiet bubble in the bustling park. The atmosphere was no longer one of a public spectacle, there were no more flashes of phone cameras seeking a viral moment, just a respectful silence, punctuated only by the soft, almost constant thump of Leo's small fingers occasionally tapping out their shared rhythm against the glass. Sarah stood nearby, observing, a notepad in her hand but mostly forgotten. She's calm, she reported into her radio, updating the zoo director and the chief veterinarian. No signs of agitation. Vital signs, from what we can observe, appear stable. She even accepted a piece of fruit earlier when Leo was right there. That's remarkable, the director's voice came back, tinged with disbelief. But what does it mean, Sarah? Why now, after all this time? And what happens when the boy goes home? It was the question hanging heavy in the air, the one everyone was thinking, even if they didn't dare voice it too loudly. This fragile, unexpected connection, what would be the cost of severing it again? Inside the enclosure, Bella began to engage in a new, compelling behavior. She started gathering objects, loose leaves, strands of fresh straw, even a tattered piece of an old Hessian sack that had been part of her enrichment. Carefully, methodically, she began to arrange them in a pile near the glass, directly in front of where Leo sat. Sarah recognized the pattern instantly, her eyes widening. "She's nesting," she muttered, a sense of awe and unease coiling within her. "She's making a sort of a bed for him." Emily, watching from a nearby bench the keepers had provided, pressed her hands over her mouth, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Leo, oblivious to the scientific term but understanding the intent, spoke up, his small voice clear. Can I give her something?" Sarah paused, considering the implications. Protocol usually forbade any direct offering from visitors. But this was far from a usual situation. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Leo reached into his little blue backpack and pulled out a small, well-loved stuffed animal, a soft, gray elephant with one ear slightly frayed and a button eye missing. It was clearly a treasured companion. With utmost care, he pressed it gently against the glass, holding it out towards Bella. Bella froze. Her eyes, ancient and deep, locked onto the offered toy. Then, slowly, cautiously, she lifted one massive hand and mirrored his gesture on her side of the barrier, her palm resting against the acrylic where the elephant's reflection shimmered. A soft, breathy sigh escaped her lips. Then, with infinite tenderness, she took the old piece of Hessian sack she had gathered and gently draped it over the reflection of the stuffed elephant, as if tucking it in under a blanket. Sarah turned to a visibly moved Emily. "She's parenting," she stated, her voice hushed. "She's gone into full maternal mode. And I truly think, she believes her child has, in some way, come back to her." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "And if he has to leave again?" Sarah had no answer. The weight of that unspoken question settled heavily between them. Later that day, in the zoo's administration office, the debate was intense. Was this interaction healthy for Bella? Was it sustainable? What were the ethical implications of fostering such a bond, only for it to be inevitably broken by daily life, by school, by the simple fact that Leo couldn't live at the zoo? Concerns about Bella regressing, about the potential for this surrogate bond to spiral into a damaging fixation, were voiced soliloquies. But Sarah pushed back, passionately. "She's healing," she argued. "For the first time in months, we're seeing signs of true engagement, not just existence. This boy, Leo, he's the key. We can't just walk away from this." A carefully considered plan began to take shape, spearheaded by Sarah and approved with cautious optimism by the zoo's ethical review board. Monitored, weekly visits for Leo, under strict supervision and with clear protocols. It wasn't just for Bella's sake. Something remarkable was happening to Leo too. In the weeks that followed, Emily watched her son transform. The quiet, sometimes withdrawn little boy who had carried a subtle air of melancholy since his father's passing began to blossom. He was sleeping better, his appetite improved, and he was more talkative, more engaged with the world around him. He chattered excitedly about Bella, about her soft rumbles and the way her eyes seemed to understand him. Emily hadn't seen this vibrant spark in her son since before she had stopped bringing him to the zoo all those years ago, when her own grief had been too raw to bear familiar places. Each week, when Leo arrived, Bella would already be waiting by the glass, her earlier agitation replaced by a calm, focused anticipation. Their reunions were quiet, devoid of grand gestures, yet profoundly moving. Leo would bring drawings he'd made, Bella with a baby gorilla, Bella with him standing beside her, sometimes just Bella's expressive face. He'd hold them up to the glass, and Bella would watch intently, occasionally letting out a soft, affirmative grunt or pressing her forehead gently to the acrylic in an apparent gesture of affection. Leo would mirror the gesture, his small forehead touching the cool surface, a moment of pure, unadulterated connection. The story of the grieving gorilla and the little boy who unlocked her heart began to circulate, first within the zoo community, then wider, as a local news outlet picked up on the extraordinary bond. Footage of Bella gently interacting with Leo through the glass, of her tenderly cradling the reflection of his stuffed elephant, touched hearts. Some called it proof of deep animal memory and emotion, others were more skeptical, attributing it to projection. But for those who witnessed it firsthand, Sarah, Emily, the other keepers, there was no doubt they were seeing something profoundly real. During one quiet afternoon visit, as Leo was recounting his day at school to a seemingly attentive Bella, Emily, encouraged by Sarah's gentle prompting, finally found the words to share a long-held secret with her son. "Leo, sweetheart," she began, her voice soft, "there's something I haven't really talked to you about why we stopped coming to the zoo when you were very little." She showed him an old, cherished photograph of a smiling man with his arms around a baby Leo. "This was your daddy. He got very sick and went to heaven when you were just a baby. I was so sad, Leo, and I didn't know how to face things, even happy places like the zoo. But you loved coming here. And you had a special name for Bella back then." Leo listened, his eyes wide, processing the information. "You used to call her Big Mama," Emily added, a wistful smile playing on her lips. Leo didn't consciously remember the name. But later that day, as he was saying goodbye to Bella, he looked into her deep, dark eyes and whispered, "Bye, Big Mama." Bella froze. A low, resonant sound, a deep, rumbling sigh filled with an unmistakable tenderness and recognition, emanated from her chest. It was a sound Sarah had never heard her make before. Somehow, against all odds, Bella remembered that too. Bella's progress was undeniable. She was eating regularly, engaging with enrichment toys, and even showing tentative signs of interacting positively with another female gorilla in her troop. The deep well of her grief hadn't vanished, but it no longer consumed her. Leo's presence had been a lifeline, a bridge back to the world. Watching this transformation, Sarah and the zoo's primate specialists began to discuss a delicate but hopeful possibility. There was a young orphan gorilla at a rescue center, a tiny female who had lost her own mother. She needed a surrogate, a troop. One sunny afternoon, Sarah knelt beside Leo at the enclosure. "Leo," she said gently, "Bella is doing so much better, and a big part of that is because of you. We think she might be ready for a new baby in her life, a real one this time." The day the infant, named Lily, arrived, the zoo staff held their collective breath. The small crate was opened. Lily, tiny and wide-eyed, wobbled out, looking utterly lost. Bella watched from a distance, cautious, still. Then, with a sureness that spoke volumes, she moved towards the infant. She sat, and Lily, after a moment's hesitation, toddled over and pressed against her leg. For the first time since losing her own child, Bella wrapped her massive arms around another, a gesture of profound acceptance and renewed purpose. Outside, Leo watched, quiet tears tracing paths down his cheeks. He didn't press his hand to the glass this time. He just smiled, a radiant, knowing smile, and whispered to the magnificent ape who had shared her grief with him, "That's great, Bella. You have your own baby now." Bella thrived as a surrogate mother to Lily, her days filled with a gentle purpose that healed the remaining vestiges of her sorrow. Leo continued his visits, less frequent now, but no less special. Their bond remained, a quiet understanding that transcended words and barriers, a testament to a connection forged in shared vulnerability and rekindled by a child's innocent empathy. Amara's, now Bella's, story, and Leo's, became a quiet legend at Oakwood City Zoo, a profound reminder that grief, however deep, can be bridged by love, and that memory and connection can resonate across species, across silence, and even across the vast expanse of time. It spoke to the enduring power of a simple, unexpected bond that changed everything, not just for a gorilla and a boy, but for all who witnessed it. What would you do if an animal remembered your face after all those years? Bella's story reminds us that some bonds, once forged, never truly break. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in connection again. Have you ever seen an animal do something truly unforgettable? Let us know in the comments.